And I say to myself, how am I supposed to go to another job where I gotta sit in a building all day and have somebody hovering over me the entire time that I'm working? And I can't handle that. This is it. I walked out of my house for the first time as an entrepreneur. Do you get the title for the attempt? Because that's what I'm going to go ready to do as a customer experience expert in the automotive industry, where I've worked for the last 18 years. So I've done, for the last 18, almost 2 decades, I've done what I'm actually setting out to do. But now I'm going to go do it as an independent contractor and offer my services to small automotive shops that don't have access to this kind of training. But it took a long time to get to this point, and I want to tell you how I got here. So let's start. In June of 2006, I went to a school. It was called the Universal Technical Institute, or UTI. This was in Houston. And the school had a local, I was from out of town, obviously, and the school was they had an area in the school to help students find full-time work while they were going to school. So I go there and I get sent to this lady. I remember everybody called her mom. So mom helped me. She sits me down in front of a computer. Now they featured automotive shops, businesses, because this was a automotive school. So they featured automotive work, and she sits me down. She has me fill out an application to a company, and then she gives me the address and phone number to said company. So anyway, I fill out the application, and a couple days later, I get a phone call. They want to interview me. Boom. They set me up a time. I have to tell you that I never got the address. I didn't ask because I'm like, I got the address already. So I get the address. I had the address, and during that time, I drive up to this place, and I walk in there, and I ask for the manager, and I'm like, hey, I have an interview. Well, the manager comes to me, replies, and he's like, I have an interview with today. I called you? And I'm like, yeah, man, I talked to a woman. She said, come on by at this time or whatever. So anyway, so he interviews me. As I get back to the house, and I get a phone call. Now, mind you, this is cell phones were I didn't have a cell phone, so this was still very much new to me. So I get a phone call, and they're like, hey, like, are you still interested for this interview? And I'm like, I'm confused. Now I'm starting to think like this whole operation is unprofessional. I'm like, what do you mean, am I here for an interview? Like, if I'm still interested, like, I went to the interview and I even got the job, right? So she asked me, where did you go? And I tell her, and she's like, sweetie, that's a franchise store. We're a corporate location. So I'm like, what? So come to find out that the lady at the school filled out an application. The application was for a corporate location, but then she gave me the contact information for a franchise store. And it was a running joke that I walked into the franchise and demanded an interview. And that's how my journey with this company began. Okay, so that took up a lot of nerves. I was so nervous. I sat in the car for about 5-10 minutes before I actually got out, and I walked in there. Probably a little smaller of a shop than I was expecting, but I walked in and the owner wasn't there. The person was real standoffish and stuff, so I just handed them the flyer and I walked out. So that kind of broke the ice. But I'm ready. Let's get it off to the next one. Grab a quick bite to eat. Tell you the rest of the story. let me apologize about the wind, just in case y'all hear all that. But let me say that at this point in my career, I have no idea. I don't know anything about cars. And I said that. I was nervous to say that. But I told him, I was like, look, dude, I don't know anything about cars. Like, is that going to be a problem? And Mark said, no, we'll train you. Don't worry about it. I thought working on cars was the coolest thing. Now, mind you, when I say I was working on cars, I was simply doing oil changes. Like, I wasn't doing like full-on maintenance or anything like that. Just oil changes. Quick lube stuff, oil changes, air filters, wiper blades, stuff like that you could do, like real lickety split type thing. It was a quick lube. It was made for 10-minute services. And that's how I cut my teeth. I thought it was the coolest thing, man. I was really excited about the prospect of what I was doing. I felt like I was a man, you know what I mean? I was like, oh, I'm working with my hands. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I felt. So when I did that for a year. And I left to go to a dealership once I graduated from school. I left to go to a dealership, and that ultimately didn't work out. That was I started this place in 06. I left to the dealership in 07, and I wound up out of a job in 08. I got laid off. So in 09, hold on, let me fix the camera. So in 09, I moved to North Carolina, which is where I spent the next, 14, 15 years of my time there. And I didn't want to go back to this company because I was worried about being able to grow. I was worried that they wouldn't hire somebody from the outside to grow within the company. I know that sounded silly, but this is what my thought process was. So ultimately, I wound up going back, and this franchise that I was with, they were just starting to do things that I was doing back in Texas, which is where I started with the company, with the brand. So this franchise was just starting to do things. They were starting to transition over to where this other franchise in Texas was at. So I came in and I knew all the part numbers. I knew all the correct like verbiage and dialogue that I need to use during the services and stuff like that. So I knew all of that. So I got hired on the spot. I got hired in December of 09. And I worked at that one store, and by February of 2010, I got offered my first store. Now, admittedly, I had some legal troubles that I was going through, so I couldn't take over the store right away. So I got promoted within the store that I was working at as an assistant manager. And I stayed in an assistant manager for about, 8-9 months until another store opened up. And when that store opened up, I was offered that store and I took it. And I got my first promotion to GM, general manager, on Halloween of 2010. In 2010, I left. In 2010, I was the store manager for 3 years. And in the first year that I was a store manager, I won an award from the owner of the franchise for General Manager of the Year. I won me some gift cards to Best Buy. and got a little cool plaque, which I think I still have to this day. And something happened though. In 2012, I was coming up on my second year, and I was in the middle of my second year, and my boss at the time convinced me to take over another store on the other side of town. Now, this store was getting ready to lose its inspection license because of fraudulent inspections being done at this location. And he convinced me, he's like, no, that's not gonna happen. The company's not gonna let that happen. Like, don't worry about it. It is what it is. So I'm like, you know what? All right, bet. So I take over that store on a Monday. That Thursday, on my first day off after taking over the store, I get a phone call from my assistant manager that says, dude, the DMV is in the store. They're ripping plaques off the wall. They're kicking inspections out. They're taking the inspection machines. Like, we're losing our inspection license. And that is how it started going downhill at that moment from there. Now, my boss, whose name I'm not going to say, we didn't get along. We didn't get along at all. And at this point, I feel like this was a setup. I feel like this is a way to get rid of me, because at this point, I'm like, I don't see a future here. I'm like, I'm in a store that's not doing much business. We lost our customers. I lost my bonus. Like, it ain't doing much. So, hold on, let me turn y'all around so y'all see the good stuff. So I lost my bonus. We weren't doing too good. So at this point, I met, during some months of not doing any business, like I said, I would show up, we would do like 2 customers a day. It was horrible. And during this time period, I met my wife, Lexi. I met Lexi, and I quickly made plans to move back to New York to be with her. And I was gonna give up this place. And in doing so, I put my 2 weeks notice in, and my boss told me that, you know, you're not coming back. Like, don't worry, don't bother coming back. Don't ask. Like, I'm not bringing you back. I thought, okay. When my boss left, his boss, who later would become my mentor, he told me, he said, look, man, let me tell you something. When you're ready to come back to North Carolina, you don't call him. You call me. You call me, and I will find a place for you back in this company. You just let me know, and I'll make it happen. And I left. I left December of 2012. And I went to New York, and I stayed in New York until about June of 2014, where I decided it was time to come back home to North Carolina and back into the franchise that I loved. So I came back. In 2014, in June, I called my boss. I called him. His name was Shannon. I called Shannon. I said, look, man, I'm ready to come back if that offer still stands. And 2 weeks later, I packed up my stuff. My wife and I packed up our stuff, and we headed down south back to North Carolina. I pretty much got right back in where I left off. In June of 2014 is when I came back. By October 2014, I get a phone call at my Walmart, and my district manager at the time, he says, hey, how would you like to be a district manager? And I jumped. I was like, holy shit, hell yeah, dude. And he says, Shannon, he said, the guy says, my district manager at the time says, Shannon, the regional manager, he says, hey, the market leader, he says, hey, Shannon wants you to put in make sure that you put in your application. And I did.
And by Halloween of 2014, I became a district manager. And that's the position I held for from 2014 to July of 2023. So I was a district manager for, I don't know, 10 years, 10 years. And I did that. I achieved so much. I learned so much. Shannon now became my boss, and he became my mentor. And Shannon was so old school, man. Like he was an older guy, and he had old school morals. And I'm gonna send him this video. So Hefe, if you watch it, I love you. But he was so old school, and man, was it fucking annoying sometimes. But he was so smart, and he was right. And when you really took what he said and put it into practice, it made so much sense. Like, he never said anything that didn't make sense. He never said like, he never gave us bad advice. You know what I mean? He would forget sometimes the advice he would give us, but he would never give us bad advice. And I learned so much from that man. And like I said, he became somebody I looked up to because he was so smart, and he thought one thing about Shannon that I loved so much, was that he knew who he was, and he put that into practice. And that was a lesson that I was learning about myself, like to learn who I was and to put that into practice, knowing who you are and then being able to maneuver that way. Like, that was something that was invaluable that I learned from it. And like I said, he was my boss until December of 2022. December 15th of 2022, and that was the last day he was my boss. And I'm going to put a photo of us the last day we worked together, where I was his employee, and I'm going to put it right here. But he was somebody I really looked up to, and at that moment when I realized that we would no longer be working together was hard. The company got bought out, and he wasn't picked up, and the rest of us were. And from that moment, I knew that I wasn't gonna stay with these new owners. I'm like, you're not gonna take Mr. this guy right here. Then if you're not taking him, I knew I didn't want to stay. And I lasted with the new owners until July. This was December 2022, and I lasted until July of 2023. And the new owners and I came to a mutual agreement, and I left. Now, I have to tell you, Shannon wasn't a micromanager. And as a matter of fact, he would tell you that he wasn't going to micromanage it. He would always tell us, you're either going to do the job or you're not going to do the job. So he never called, at least not to me. Maybe he did it to everybody else, but at least not to me. He never was like, where are you this and where are you that and where are you going to be and stuff like that. He never did that to me. And I mean, I must have talked to Shannon once a week at our weekly meeting for an hour, where I would speak to him, and then I wouldn't speak to him for the rest of the week until the next following week, where it was the meeting, and then all over again. And that is how we got here. Because when I left that job, I had so much freedom. And the district that I ran was so spread out that my district spanned at most 7 different cities, and I had 10 different stores. So I was always on the go. I was constantly moving. And he didn't have time to follow me around and make sure I was where I needed to be. So we rarely spoke. And I never broke his trust. I'm not gonna say that I was a perfect angel, but I did what I was supposed to do, and I never made him question what I was doing and where I was at on a regular basis. At least I hope not. So I had the freedom to come and go. I worked when I wanted to. So I chose whatever day off I wanted to take. I worked as long as I wanted to. Like, I had that freedom. I was essentially my own boss. So now that I left and I'm having to start all over, and I say to myself, how am I supposed to go to another job where I gotta sit in a building all day and have somebody hovering over me the entire time that I'm working? And I can't handle that. And although I'm doing it temporarily now, and like I told you in the past, essentially I'm starting all over financially, I said the next move has got to be entrepreneurship. The next move has got to be I'm working for myself. I've proved that I can do it and I can handle the responsibility, that I can be disciplined enough to get up and go to work like I'm supposed to every day. I don't have a problem doing that. Which is where this led me now. Entrepreneurship is the next logical move. I feel like it's where I belong. I feel like that everything I've learned in the last 14 years of that company, of that franchise, has led me to this moment here of running, of doing and working for myself. So that's where I'm at. I'm gonna take the skills that I've learned over the course of that time while working for Shannon, and I'm gonna offer them to sale to smaller companies, to smaller shops that don't have the resources or access to the kind of training that I got at this company for free, just for being there. And I figured it was the best thing to do for me. It'll give me the fact that I won't have to sit at a brick and mortar all day. It'll give me financial stability, making money back to where I'm comfortable making it. And I won't be micromanaged and having somebody sit over me watching every step I do. Because I can't begin to tell you how much I hate being micromanaged. And that's the story on how I got here, on how I got to the point where I felt like entrepreneurship is the next logical step for me to take in my career, to prove to myself that I can accomplish the things that I want to accomplish on my own. I don't know if this is gonna work. I don't know if I'm gonna succeed or if I'm gonna fall on my face. But I do know that this is my shot to make something happen and continue doing what I was doing at the level that I was doing it at. And I won't stop at nothing until I achieve the goals that I want to achieve. So it's not where you start, it's where you finish.